So hello everyone, welcome back to another one of our webinars this fall. We'll have a few more before we wrap up the semester. Hard to believe we're already halfway through, and we'll be doing more of these speaker series through next spring, as well as we bring in real estate professionals from throughout the industry to talk about their careers in real estate law and various issues related to it. So with us today are Mike, Noonan, and Donna Pugh at Foley and Lardner here in Chicago. And then Donna, the way we normally do this, we'll have people, if they feel comfortable, obviously interrupting you guys at an appropriate time if they have questions. We do that. Otherwise, they just post it in the chat, and then I'll make sure that questions get answered at some point when it's appropriate. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. You should be able to share your screen, Mike, if you'd like to now. And we can go ahead and get the party started.
Okay, tell me when you see it.
Yep, looks like we're good.
Okay, okay. Yeah, it won't matter to me because I'm going to be looking on here.
Okay.
Yeah, so just on this cover page, we want to make sure to point out our emails because we do a lot of speaking to students, and we really encourage people to contact us. And if you're looking for a job, or you want some career guidance, or you just want to get a cup of coffee or anything, if you want to reach out to us, here are our emails. So
hey, 1 second, Donna. It looks like you switched back to the Zoom tab. So that's what we're seeing right now.
Okay. Great.
There we go. Now we're good.
Okay. Okay. So you can just leave it like that, Mike.
All right.
Okay.
Well, let me just move this over. It's not going to stay like this.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, so you can make note of those email addresses there. And now I'm ready for the next slide, Mike. Okay. So I wanted to explain a little bit about sort of my career, and then, of course, Mike will explain about his. So we obtain governmental approvals. We do a lot of work with retail, shopping centers, office buildings. We do some residential development, although that's slowing way down. Healthcare, we represent a large hospital system and just have a lot of corporate clients. We really focus on consensus building, that rather than scorched earth type of approach where we're going to sue or go to court or, browbeat everybody, we try to listen real hard, and we try to gravitate towards clients who will listen and understand what the issues are that seem to concern the community or the governmental body. And then we try to address the issues. So if people are concerned about parking or traffic or height or shadows, we try to respond to that and listen. Public speaking, I just wanted to highlight that how important I think public speaking is for students to be thinking about already. Some of the things I do is like an all-day land use seminar for ICL, and we do that every other year, and then we do for financial poise or a number of webinars we've done, and even for John Marshall Law School at their Credible. But we do a lot of even really informal speaking like this situation, or to other student groups, or even to really small groups. When anyone is expressing any kind of interest in something we're doing, we say, oh, we'd be happy to talk to you about that. Sometimes we'll just put together a Zoom call of like 12 people to talk about, the city's new affordable requirements ordinance that they're proposing or things like that. And so Zoom is actually a great platform to make your own public speaking opportunity. And so I really do encourage students to start now thinking about their public speaking. Similarly, the publication opportunities, like Mike and I are both involved in the Illinois State Bar, the local government law, where we've published a number of articles, very short, simple ones, but it's a great opportunity to get something published. Shopping center legal update, I had a more formal presentation there for the International Council of Shopping Centers, or ICSC. And then the zoning and planning law report, again, that's a little more formal, but anytime you get an opportunity to publish something, even on your local, on your, somebody mentioned KPMG, I'm sure they have an internal and intranet, and there'd be an opportunity to get something published on there. Those are the kinds of things that can help build your resume. And then I'm a big believer in leadership. That is, right now I have some, pretty senior level leadership. I chaired the section of the American Bar State and Local Government section. It's 10,000 members and very visible position. Got a lot of visibility out of that. Currently served for ICSC for the Central Division Operations Chair, where I get to meet people from all around the Midwest. Board member of the Near South Planning Board, which is kind of helps me a lot with my zoning work because it makes me more familiar with the Near South area. And I've been an officer of the Magnificent Mile Association for many years and now hold the position of treasurer. So these types of positions, I've risen through the ranks, but it's always great to just start by joining. And then the very first thing you want to look at is what committee can I get on? Even as a student member, for example, ICSC has student memberships, ABA has student membership. And our section, the state and local government section, Mike is the co-chair of and he'll talk about this, but of the young lawyers area, and they are so welcoming. So if you're already a student member, I think it's either free or $25, and there's a lot of opportunity there to write and speak. So me being a past chair or Mike being an officer, we could help with that if you're interested in getting involved with the ABA. So okay, now we're ready to switch. Okay, to you, Mike.
So like I said, I'm Mike Noonan. I'm graduated from Chicago Kent in 2015, and as Jack pointed out, I'm a former president of this club. I'm glad to see that it's in capable hands and alive and well. And I believe the year I was president was when we changed the name to Lure, to Land Use and Real Estate. It was something else before. So if you love the name or hate it, you're welcome. But that was, I think this is the second or third time I've spoken to the club since I've graduated. So I'm always happy to do that. When I was at Kent, I focused on real estate and environmental law. I actually got a certificate in environmental law. When I came to law school, I thought I might want to do intellectual property, and I ended up shifting focus on that. And I got into environmental law through the Environmental Law Clinic, which I spoke with. Keith Harley was the professor running it at the time, and I think he still is. And he actually got me to work on a zoning case. So the first matter I did while working for the Environmental Law Clinic was amending the zoning code and the zoning code of Chicago, and it is still amended to this day. I'm in the use table.
All right.
For bulk material storage.
But tell a little bit about what that involves.
Yeah, so this was the clinics, if you're not aware, at Kent they are professor led, but they're representing real world clients in real life. So we had a client. They were a grassroots environmental group on the southeast side of Chicago, and they were having a lot of problems with a nearby bulk storage facility. Basically, there was this fine black dust that's called petroleum coke, and the southeast side of Chicago is just across the lake from Whiting, Indiana, where there's a very big oil refinery. And as part of a remodernization deal for the oil refinery, the state of Indiana required that the pet coke that is a byproduct of oil refining not be stored in Indiana. So it was sent on rail cars and on barges over to the southeast side of Chicago, which is a kind of a lower income working class neighborhood. So our client, there was a very, very big dust up, a literal dust up, where a windstorm took one of these piles of fine black powder and blew it all over the neighborhood during a baseball game, and it looked like the sky was blacked out. It was a very big deal at the time. But long story short, the action we took was to amend the zoning code to prohibit the use of bulk material storage, outdoor material storage, within certain areas and within 100 feet of residential areas, because there were residential backyards backing up to these giant piles of petroleum coke. So that was one of the things we did as part of this matter. Was we amended the zoning code. We advised on the drafting of an ordinance amending the code. We took it to the city's committee on zoning and building regulations, and then we took it through city council. And there, with all the requisite drama that entails, So it was a great experience. And if you're interested in doing something more real estate or zoning focused, I'd still recommend the environmental law clinic. And if you tell Professor Harley that, he will work on getting you in a case that focuses on those things, because that's what I did, and I got to do a zoning case. But as Donna mentioned, we focus on land use and zoning, and I like this area because for me it's sort of a middle ground between a transactional law practice and a litigation practice. We don't do a lot of heavy document drafting, but we do draft some documents sometimes. We do advise on those sometimes. You know, we don't go to court every day, but I go to court maybe once or twice a year, and we do get to present in front of zoning board of appeals, city council committees, different village boards. So it's not like we're not in front of people talking and doing our thing. So I like that it's that kind of middle ground. And as Donna mentioned, I'm also active in the Chicago Bar Association, where I'm the co-chair of the local government committee, as well as the American Bar Association state and local government section, where I've very wisely taken on about 5 different roles there. I think I'm co-chair of the Young Lawyers Committee. I'm co-chair of the Sharing Economy Committee. I'm I'm chair of the Transportation Subcommittee of another committee. It's a lot, but they're a great organization that I'll talk about more, and it's a really great opportunity to get your name out there, especially when you're just starting out.
Yeah, Mike and Donna, I did have a question that someone sent in asking about what organizations that you guys would suggest for law students, since obviously you're involved with a number of them already. You mentioned the Young Lawyers Committee, but are there others for people who might really be looking towards real estate or land use specifically that you'd recommend students take a look at?
Yeah, even though we're saying the word Young Lawyers Committee, that is actually a different entity from the one within the ABA that we are a member of, which is the state and local government law section. So state and local government law section is the section that we are recommending, and they make it very affordable. Like I say, it's either $0 or $25 to become a member of the ABA, and then you can just join the section. If anyone is interested in doing that, please email us, because we can make an introduction and get you on a committee.
And we do have a Young Lawyers Committee within that section.
Right.
There's a Young Lawyers division of the ABA, which is separate from the Young Lawyers Committee of the state and local government section. ABA is great. It is very kind of hierarchical and bureaucratic, and you kind of learn the more you get involved, but that's the distinction. There's a Young Lawyers division, and then there's this section which focuses on the substantive area of state and local government law, and there's also a Young Lawyers Committee in there too. So that's where I'm involved.
Right. And then our section also has, in addition to Mike as the Young Lawyers liaison or person, there also is a law student liaison. So if someone was very interested and really wanted to make a commitment, and right now it's not that big a commitment because you don't have to travel, there's always an opportunity to become a law student liaison to the section. So there's lots of opportunity. And then there's always speaking and writing opportunity within the ABA. The reason I think I'm stressing the ABA is that they really are focused on young people now, and they specifically making opportunities where when I was coming along, I was over and over again waving my hand. I'd be happy to write, I'd be happy to speak. And it was almost as if I wasn't even saying anything, because it was all about the more senior lawyers who, to me, felt like they were ready to retire, and they were all doing all the speaking and all the writing, and the younger people never had opportunities. So this is, to me, a wonderful chance. And then likewise with the local government, with the Chicago Bar Association, our local government committee is kind of revitalized in the last 3 or 4 years back toward a direction of land use, whereas for a while it got off on a tangent, sort of the judicial municipal bar and things like that. So we've got the committee back, and so since it's kind of just growing and expanding now, like there's going to be a seminar, and I know they could use help with that, and students are very welcome, as long as they are members of the Chicago Bar Association. Okay, so we're ready to start. But we appreciate that question, and please don't hesitate, Jack, or others, to jump in. So we thought it might help to take a look at a zoning map. This is the Chicago zoning map, just a kind of the downtown, actually right where we're sitting. I guess you can't see out our back window because we had to shut the curtain. It was too bright, but we are right on the Chicago River. And this is an example. Mike, you might want to highlight in any area, and I'll point it up, but maybe over to the left a little bit. There, go south of the river, to the right a little more. Okay, you see how there's cross hatching there? That's an overlay zone where they have a special district where there's certain special rules that apply. All the different markings on here refer to different things, like where it says PD such and such, that's a plan development number. And Mike, can you actually click, not that you can do it right now, but do you click right through to those PDs, or you have to look them up?
When I'm on the zoning map, I can.
Yeah,
just a
okay.
screenshot. But
Yeah. So nowadays it's even interactive, and it's very valuable that you can go on and see those plan developments. I used to have to, like, one by one collect them and had them in my drawer, and I had almost every PD, but now there's what, 600 of them or something. Yeah, okay, all right, well, quite a few. So you can't really, luckily that's now all electronically available. But the first thing you want to do is you want to look up your site, and on whatever city it is, San Bernardino, California, or wherever your project is, in your day jobs, if you have different jobs, or after you graduate, and see what the zoning is. And then the next slide, you want to look at the zoning code that corresponds. So one of the first things you do is look at the use. So for example, we do a lot of work for Wendy's hamburgers. So we want to know, if you see under AA, eating and drinking establishments, it looks like they're permitted. Restaurant limited is permitted in all districts. And let's say I'm in a B3, general restaurants would be allowed as well. But you need to always read through all of the entries, because as you see under Z, drive-through facility is not permitted, only as a special use. So this is intended to indicate that you have to be really thorough. You might look at, think that you know what your use is. And I think later you're going to talk about BioLife.
Yeah.
Okay. So for example, we do work with a plasma collection facility. And in some zoning ordinances, it might actually say plasma collection permitted. In other, it might just say medical use. And then you have to figure out, is that under the definition of medical use, or do I need to get an opinion? So the use is one of the most important things, but you got to read all the way through it, is the point of this exercise here. Okay, next slide is, so bulk standards like floor area ratio is how many square feet you can have in your building. So this example, let's choose the middle slide there. Sorry, if you can show with the cursor, where it says FAR equals 1.1. Okay, so up above we have one floor covering every inch of the site. That's a 1.0 FAR. That's what it looks like. But below, you could take the same square footage and stack it on top and cover half the site, but 2 stories tall. So that's to illustrate that you can stack up the same square footage differently and still have the same FAR of 1.0, for example. So that where you could stack it up 4 stories high and cover a quarter of the site. So usually your architect does these calculations, but the attorney should know something about floor area or FAR. There's setbacks to worry about, like how many feet back from the front and back and side that you can be. Height, there's usually a limitation. How many parking spaces and loading spaces you have to have. how much open space you have to have, how much percentage of the lot that you can cover. And nowadays there's even bike parking, required bike parking. So the point is to just give you an example of some of the things that you want to look at when you're thinking of developing a property or redeveloping a property. We can go to the next slide. Oh, that's you, Mike.
Yep. So another big category that is becoming increasingly, I guess, popular is sustainable regulations found in zoning codes and building codes. And those include things like LEED, which is a standard that's been devised by a group of architects and engineers for environmentally friendly buildings, and they have different levels of LEED, and some jurisdictions it's very straightforward. Their sustainability requirement is you have to be at least gold silver, or LEED silver, or LEED gold, or LEED platinum. They kind of make a requirement based on that. And then other ones, and some of these are more Chicago specific, but they do go across the country. Bird strike prevention measures. There's actually certain kind of glass you have to use on a high-rise building so that birds don't fly into it. Transit-oriented development. Those are developments where you are a certain distance from a transit, like a train station or an arterial bus route or a metro station. And because of your proximity to transit, you can get reductions in things like your parking requirement. You can get increased density. All things that are designed to promote less reliance on automobiles and more use of transit. There are also transit-friendly improvements that you can get credit for toward your sustainable regulation requirements. Those are things like putting a CTA transit tracker display in your lobby, or having a divvy station outside your building, or having a couple parking spaces in your garage dedicated to zip cars or other car sharing services. And these are all, at the end of the day, what the city of Chicago has, it's called a development matrix, and it's a big chart, and there are so many categories, and for whichever thing you do in each category, you get so many points. And depending on the development you're trying to do, you may have to have 100 points. So you could say, all right, I'm going to do a divvy station. I'm going to put the CTA thing in the lobby. That might be 20 points towards your 100. I'm going to put in permeable pavers. That might be another 20 points. I'm going to do a green roof, et cetera, et cetera. Different things count for different amounts. And these are increasingly important in new developments. And one of the other main things that we do too, usually if you're doing a map amendment or a rezoning, that's one of the triggers for those sustainable regulations. And a map amendment or a rezoning is a pretty common approval that's being sought. And what you're doing is if you think back to that zoning map that we showed you, you'll change your DX16 to something else, or you'll change your R4 to a different letter number combination. What that does, it allows you to seek either more density, different uses. Those are the main things that people are looking for, but there are also different setback requirements and different things like that. The city shies away from doing what are called spot zonings, and that's where you take one piece of land and zone it something completely unique from all the area around it. They really have a policy of sort of uniform zoning where things match what's around it. You wouldn't have a completely residential area and stick an industrial parcel in the middle of there. It wouldn't make sense, and it's really not good public policy. So there are buffer areas too where say you're trying to transition from an area that is heavy in residential development to an area that is heavy in industrial development. You might have some commercial uses sort of buffering those two areas. That's another way. But again, the spot zoning is where you would take one parcel in that buffer and change it to something unique or specific. That's usually frowned upon. And downzoning is a tool used usually by aldermen in Chicago. If there's a piece of property that's vacant and they want to exercise some control over it, they will aldermanically rezone it down to a residential 1, which means you could really only put a single family house there. They'll kind of, I don't know, is it fair to say they'll hold it hostage?
Yeah.
Until a proposal that they like comes along.
Hey, Mike, pardon my interruption, but you mentioned that you're negotiating with the city, but who exactly are you talking to? Or are you talking to just like a zoning committee? Is it a different group every time, or is there kind of is there always like a same sort of person or people that you talk to in any case?
So there's really a handful of folks, but they're the same folks in most places you go. So there's usually an elected representative. In Chicago, we have aldermen. In different places, we have village board members or trustees or councilmen, whatever they're called. But they're basically the legislative branch of that municipality. And a lot of times they represent a geographic area. And in Chicago, the aldermen have a lot of power over their geographic area. So that's one party you're going to want to talk to. And I'm going to do a short version of this because we've actually got a slide about it later. But there's also city staff. And in Chicago, that's the Department of Planning and Development. In a lot of places, it's called things like community development, or sometimes they'll work with economic development if you're doing things like incentives. But there's always city staff involved as well. But that's a great question, and we do have a slide pretty much dedicated just to that.
Yeah.
There's also community stakeholders too. We've got a whole other slide about that as well.
I'm going to interject just to say I can see that we're so dark. I was trying to adjust under video. There's like a thing to make it more light. Yeah.
Okay.
And then maybe people could see us a little better.
You guys look fine from my end.
Okay.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
From here, it looked like we were completely dark. Okay. Then you just go back. Okay. Okay.
I think I was going to talk about that. Yeah. So next, this is just a case study of a project we did in Oak Park for our client Albion Development. They develop residential apartment buildings, and this one involved a zoning change from what in Oak Park was a B4, which is they're basically their densest commercial business type district, and they sought a planned development, which is something we're going to talk about a little bit later. But the planned development allowed them to build a taller building than they would normally be able to build under the current zoning and put more units in it. And those were the two main things they were looking for in their rezoning for that one. But these are just some elevations of the building. Our client actually had proposed a more uniform square building, and after some community feedback, they did these step backs here in order to provide more light for the park that is behind the building. So that was kind of, Donna was saying we don't like to do projects where it's kind of my way or the highway, and this was a great client in that they were able to work with the community stakeholders. There was a very vocal group of neighbors that wanted the park protected. They came up with the solution of these step backs to allow for more light in the park. But another type of approval that we commonly seek is what's called a text amendment. And this is different from a map amendment because in the map amendment, you're changing the designation of a parcel on the map. But in a text amendment, you're actually changing the code itself. So if you think back to that chart, that's part of the code, and you would seek to change a portion of that chart. So maybe you have a use chart that does not allow a specific use in the B district. So you may seek an amendment to make that use be allowable in the B district, or make it be a special use. Or you may want to change the definition of that use, or a standard such as a parking requirement. So we like to do these because they're a lot of times they can be less controversial than a map amendment. And they also can provide sort of benefits to other properties. It's usually a good way of getting support for them is if you change a definition, and if you change a standard in, say, the B4 district, it's not only going to affect your property and allow your project to go forward, but anybody who's got B4 zoning really kind of gets a benefit. They can maybe do a little more with their land, or have a little less parking, or it really gives them a benefit. And the picture there is one of our clients. They develop plasma collection facilities, and that's a very specific use. It's like a blood bank, but it's not quite a blood bank. And a lot of zoning codes around the country don't account for plasma collection in their code. So what we normally do, they might have a medical office use, they might have a clinic use. Sometimes they have a blood bank, but very few actually have a plasma collection center. So we will work with city staff to get a statement in writing that, okay, we've got medical office and that's allowed here. Your use is a medical office, or we allow blood banks here. Your use is close enough to a blood bank that we'll consider it a blood bank. but sometimes we'll have to go in and seek a text amendment in order to put the plasma collection use in their code in order to build one in that place. The next here is special uses are another type of relief that we seek. The pictures here are from the newly opened Nature's Care Company cannabis dispensary that we worked on at 810 West Randolph. Not that I'm encouraging anyone to go, but they did open on Monday. So this was one. A cannabis dispensary, like a lot of other things, are special uses. And special uses are uses, by their definition in the code, require an extra level of scrutiny before they can be authorized. They're not permitted as of right. They require an extra layer of process because of the type of use, because it may be a sensitive use. And they usually involve submitting a large application, going in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, which in Chicago is a group of appointed members. They're usually from the legal or architectural or development backgrounds, and they review your use based on a set of criteria. Most of those criteria involve impact to the surrounding neighborhoods, or is this new use going to affect traffic in a positive or negative way? Is this new use going to impact the off-street parking situation in the neighborhood in a different way? So they have all these criteria that they're supposed to look at, and they will approve or deny your request for that use based on their review of that criteria. So this is common for cannabis dispensaries, drive-throughs, any environmentally impacting uses like recycling centers, scrap yards, what else we got? Tattoo parlors, depending churches, those are very parking intensive. It'll depend on what the underlying zoning is, whether or not a use is a special use or allowed as of right. So those are another common type of relief that we seek for our clients. And last for me are the variations. These also go to the zoning code, to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And what distinguishes variations from special uses is that a variation is done on a piece of property that is unique in some way, just by its existence. So the building pictured there is on the corner of Milwaukee and Belden in Chicago. So if you're familiar with Milwaukee Avenue, you know Milwaukee Avenue is a diagonal street that runs northwest and southeast. And then Belden is an east-west street. So because of this diagonal here, the building is on a really strangely shaped lot. The standard Chicago lot is a rectangle, and with that rectangle, it's very easy to have certain setback requirements and other things like that. So, but this lot is unique because it's a triangle, and the building is unique. So it's difficult for this lot to comply with things like setbacks or things like density or rear yard requirements. So if you want to do something different, you would seek a variation, and you have to show a hardship with a variation. And that's not something you have to show for a special use, but if you want to say, I deserve a variation from this code provision, you've got to show your hardship and why your properties are unique. And here you would argue, well, this property is unique because it's on the corner of a diagonal street. So we're a triangle lot. We're not a regular rectangle lot. Therefore, the requirements that apply to rectangle lots can't really work for us. So that's the ask you're making with a variation. And next, Donna's going to talk about plan developments.
All right. So plan developments are usually something where you need either something is so big, like United Center or 900 North Michigan is what this is a picture of, which is a 6-story mall plus the Four Seasons Hotel plus condominiums plus a big parking structure. So either something is of a certain scale that it deserves or needs a plan development, or by the way, in some states they're called planned unit developments, or the suburbs they call them PUDs, that type of thing. But it's usually involving either something that's so large, or it's a mixture of uses, like I was describing in the picture on the left. These are 3 properties that we work with. So the common ownership and control is a requirement that even though, for example, at 900 North, there's different owners of the different, like the hotel owns its own vertical space in the shopping centers separate from the condominiums, but there is common control. There's a reciprocal easement agreement that they all work on, that they all work under together to make sure things are uniform and attractive and clean and maintained. But the planned development really allows for flexibility. So a lot of times if you just can't fit what you want to do into all the boxes that Mike went through, rezoning or changing the code, if you can't make it work any other way, you could probably do it as a planned development or a planned unit development. Okay, so we're ready for the next slide. So here's an example of one that we worked on more recently for the Blackhawks, the Chicago Blackhawks. Their practice facility is a community ice rink. So they wanted a practice facility, and then the mayor at the time, Rahm Emanuel, said, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could do 2 ice rinks and do one of them is for the team and one's for the community? So they said yes, and then we don't have a whole floor plan in here, but the you can see the layout. It's gigantic, much bigger than it would normally be for one ice rink. They have training in there for children and youth, and they teach you also about math and science, and then they let you out on the ice rink where they teach you how to skate if you don't know, or how to play hockey. And it's a great community asset, but it's also a great facility for the team to practice. And so this is an example where we actually acquired the land from the city. It had been the Malcolm X Community College, which they built a new Malcolm X and tore down the old one. And so we bought some of the land there and had to do an acquisition from the city and then get the zoning. And then of course, you go through environmental cleanup and everything. So wanted to give you that as an example of some of the things we work on. The next slide is it just so happens to be also related to the Blackhawks and the Bulls. So in this case, you can see United Center in the background. In the foreground, they wanted to develop a practice facility for the Bulls. So this came several years before. So because the PD allowed sports uses, but it really had only provided specifically for the United Center. So we amended, I'm sorry, you got a minor change to the PD to say it's still allowing sports and all the same uses, but adding as an allowable use, for example, a physical therapy, which is an offshoot of the practice facility. They wanted to have physical therapy in there as well. You know, sometimes there's a need to adjust the number of parking spaces or timing provisions or different things like that. These are the kind of minor things you can do as a minor change. We can go to the next slide. Okay, and then we wanted to talk about some overlay districts. I showed you some of that on the map in the beginning. Now, Michigan Avenue, for example, has its own special sign district. This picture on the left is Uniqlo on Michigan Avenue, up above Top Shop and Top Man, which is now been replaced. But when Uniqlo, our client asked us to help them with their approvals, and they had a really creative and vibrant facade with pictures of the merchandise and color schemes and signage. Well, that was, there were some on Michigan Avenue who thought it was too colorful or aggressive, or maybe they thought it was tacky, and were resistant. So there was quite a bit of process, but now that it's there, everyone loves it. It's always in social media, and it's a very beloved institution there, but it did take some going through some hoops. So that's just as an example. You might see a store like that and not know that it went through a whole process. And then on the right, we had an industrial corridor here at Goose Island, and then this is showing, a proposal to redevelop it. And hasn't all come to pass, but it's a great plan. And they did require some major changes to that area to allow for uses other than industrial. There's also pedestrian streets where, for example, a use like Wendy's hamburgers may or may not be allowed because where they try to discourage new driveways and curb cuts. And then landmark districts where they try to preserve existing buildings or protect what kind of changes to the facade can happen. So not only do you need to worry about what zoning you have, but is there an overlay district or an additional requirement? And you can usually see that on the zoning map in most cities, but other cities you have to kind of dig for it and look at their codes and see if there's extra codes in there. So you just have to be very thorough. Mike?
All right, so the fun part about what we do is identifying and managing stakeholders. And this is a big part of what a zoning attorney does for a new project or a big change from an existing one. We always advise our clients to figure out who your immediate neighbors are, talk to them about the project, and have an open door, let them know what you're planning on doing, get their feedback. So your neighbors are always very important when you're developing a new project. In Chicago, we've got your alderman. Who's your alderman? You know, other jurisdictions that could be your councilman or your trustee, but especially in Chicago, there's a big component of getting a new project approved, especially if it goes through any legislative process like a plan development or a rezoning. You're going to need the support of the alderman because they are going to pass legislation that will allow you to build your project. There's also local community groups, and those come in a lot of different stripes. So by way of example, on the cannabis dispensary that we did, there were probably no fewer than 4 community groups that we worked with on that one. There was 2 or 3 of them that had overlapping geographical jurisdiction in the West Loop. There was a social equity group that was wanting to ensure that social equity was a big part of the cannabis legalization in Illinois. And there were, you know, local restaurant groups that are also chambers of commerce, different kinds of groups. And depending on the nature of your project, you may have to work with them in order to get their support, or you may have to change your project a little bit to make them happy. And then lastly, it's worth looking at who the competitors are, both in your area and in your space, both your industry area and your geographic space. So for example, when you're putting a cannabis dispensary in the West Loop, it's important to work with the restaurants nearby there because they're worrying, okay, what is this new use going to do to my business? Are they going to be lining up on the sidewalk when my guests are trying to eat on the patio? Are they going to be taking up all the parking? You know, are there going to be high people walking around? You know, what's going to be the impact of this new use? So working with competitors and neighbors to really, the goal is to reach common ground and build consensus so that sort of all boats rise. And a lot of times you can walk away with a letter of support from those neighbors. Next, this goes to one of the questions that was asked earlier about approaching a municipality. So we like to, anytime we have a project in a new jurisdiction, we will want to look at how the local government is set up. And that's from the different departments and who are the relevant staff folks in each department. And this is a small excerpt of the organizational chart for the Department of Planning and Development in Chicago. So if I'll zoom in here, this is the very top of the chart. You've got your commissioner, first deputy commissioner, and then these folks here are kind of top of their department, but we're going to take this person here, the zoning administrator, as we work with this department a lot. They've got a whole flow chart of folks underneath them that, you know, if you make your request to the wrong person, it might go nowhere. It might go somewhere very slowly. So it really helps to kind of do your research and see who's in charge of what. You know, you would really want to ask the right person the right question. For example, this person here, you want to ask about plan developments and minor changes. That's one of their things, or opinion letters. This person here is in charge of the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's a different body that we do a lot of work with. So everybody here's kind of got a different job, and you want to make sure your request goes to the right person. Similarly with elected officials, you want to determine who the important elected officials are. It's of course your local elected official, but there may be elected officials that are liaisons to different committees that your project may have to go through. For example, we did a project in Missouri where it went to the Planning and Zoning Committee, which is a board of appointed citizens, but they have an aldermanic liaison. So that alderman, even though he wasn't our geographic alderman, he was still important because he communicated with that committee and he sort of brought back the findings of that committee to the whole city council. So he was very important in that project. And when you go to communicate with them, you do have to be careful. Some in a lot of jurisdictions, they have what are called no ex-parte communication rules, and that's where you're not really allowed to speak to an elected official about a pending matter unless you are in an open meeting or in a public forum. You're not allowed to privately approach elected officials. And that really varies by jurisdiction, and you have to check your ethics rules on those. But a lot of times, in some places you can talk to the alderman. In some places it's very common and required to have a meeting with the alderman before you go up for legislation. And in other places, it's all done at the staff level, and then you work with the alderman in a public forum. So it really depends on where you're at for that one. And then finally, we wanted to circle back to career advice for law students. That is a photo of me doing karaoke at one of the more recent annual American Bar Association meetings in Chicago. And the purpose of putting that up is it's a fun group, and it gives you an opportunity, especially as a young lawyer, to kind of rub shoulders with sort of legal giants. You know, there are people in that section who are judges, who have argued in front of the Supreme Court, who have literally wrote the book on whatever thing it is that they do. And you can, going to the different meetings and being active in the committees, you can really get to know these folks. It's a little intimidating that, the person who argued the Kelo opinion or whatever is on your committee, and they're the expert in eminent domain. But it's also really cool that you get to work with folks who have this expertise and this experience. So I kind of went out of order here. As a law student, I think what you guys are all doing in terms of being involved in lure is very important. I think a big part of why Donna hired me was my involvement in the land use and real estate club. A lot of times, especially in a more niche area like zoning, it's great to show that you have a demonstrated interest and a committed interest to that area of law. It goes a long way. It goes a longer way than you might think. It's more than just free pizza. That actually can help you make a good career move. And then legal clinics, as I spoke about too. I thought the Chicago Kent Environmental Law Clinic was really fantastic. It was a great way to get real world experience. But also things like internships and externships, summer associateships, things like that are also very helpful. As a lawyer, Donna and I are both active in bar associations, and we find those to be really crucial, especially for what we do. A lot of our work is local, but we do have a big component of our work that is national in scope. And sometimes you need a zoning attorney in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And if you don't happen to know anybody in Tulsa, Oklahoma, you might want to reach out to your American Bar Association friend who is out that way. You might know somebody, he might be the guy. So it's great to have those networks, and it goes both ways too, because they'll refer things back to you. If you're someone's person in Chicago, we've got a lot of work through that. Did you want to talk about the trade groups a little more?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, I wanted to echo a couple things you were just saying. One about lure, which I didn't realize it had that exact acronym, but it's cute. I like it. That is actually, Mike was recommended to me by another lure member who I was very impressed with. And she said, oh, he loves land use. He helped change the focus of the club to land use, and he's our president. And just based on the strength of that I knew he loved land use, and she was recommending him. He was the only one we interviewed. I mean, he got the job based on that. And so also I realize this is not legal, but Rho Epsilon is a real estate fraternity out of University of Illinois, which is one of the places where we speak to students, or actually me and my other partner. And I know so many people who have been hired through being in that club, in that real estate fraternity, they call it fraternity, but club. And so many people here in Chicago that went to U of I, for example, they will hire only from that real estate club, because again, it's a demonstrated interest that these people, by being in a club as a student, that they have shown that they're interested in that. So don't underestimate the impact of these things. And once people come to speak, definitely reach out to them and connect. You know, with COVID, it's a little harder to get together, but to at least maybe do a Zoom call with them and kind of seek them out as a mentor. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And then on the ABA, I'm realizing, Jack, when you mentioned SIFAR, so our immediate past chair is a guy named Ron Kramer. I don't know if you've met him yet. Have you met him at SIFAR?
I have, just in passing though.
Okay, so that's an example where, you know, we know Ron. I probably would not have known him at all because he's more in the public sector labor law. I probably wouldn't have known him at all if I were just practicing, but by being through the ABA, I've gotten to know him really well. And so now when you mention the firm, we know the firm. It just helps to know people in places. And please tell Ron hello when you get there. And then also, as Mike mentioned, about getting business around the country and also being able to give business, because it makes it you look good to your client that, oh, you know, literally this Tulsa, Oklahoma is an example, and San Bernardino, California, things like that, where we're able to say, oh yeah, we know people there and we can help you out, and we kind of help supervise. That's very impressive versus just a lawyer that just knows Chicago. And then I know we're running late on time, but I've got a couple minutes, I think, to talk about the trade groups. For example, I do a lot of work with shopping centers, and happens to be what I like. I like the kind of people that are in retail. They're usually kind of fun, a little bit, maybe a little bit wild and crazy even, and just like, I like the vibe of it. So I deliberately got very involved in ICSC and, you know, made myself real visible, as I mentioned earlier, as an officer. So I get a lot of work from that because that's something I like and I want to do more of. And for example, I do some work with hospitals, but the vibe is different there. It's maybe not as, you know, it's a little more buttoned up, a little more serious. And so, for example, that isn't something I've decided to spend time in my spare time. Instead, you should spend your time in the direction that you feel drawn and comfortable. But Mike, in case you wanted to wrap up.
Oh, no, looks like we got a question from.
Oh, sorry. Okay, where'd that go?
Trying,
raised hand.
Trying to ask you to unmute. I'm new to this.
Hi. Donna, I really like what you said about how, you know, you like working with ICSC and with retail because the people are, you know, really outgoing and stuff. That's definitely what has drawn me to real estate as well. Could you guys please touch a little bit more on, I guess, where your, you know, fine lawyering skills come in? Because it sounds like a lot of what you guys do is like communicating with, you know, different people in the city and the government and different stakeholders. So it definitely sounds like you guys have that social aspect, or like, you know, strong communication. At what point, or like how much of your day is, you know, sitting at your desk doing research or, you know, gathering information, and how much of your day is, you know, going out and about and communicating with the people that you need to communicate with to help your clients?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I'm not sure I can assign a specific percent, although I'll think about that for a minute, but definitely the legal part is, when you get a project, is figuring out what its zone and what's on the title and survey, and analyzing everything about the real estate to see what restrictions there are, and then looking at the zoning code and similar cases to see what might be allowed or what might be a logical thing to shoot for. So that's sort of the legal front end. And then also when it comes time to draft and negotiate the plan development or whatever the document is, or like buying the land from the city, there's a lot of negotiation there. about that Malcolm X college or something like that. So that, but then there is a fair amount that's dealing with okay, the strategy, where we lay out a strategy of these are the stakeholders that we've identified. This is the strategy we're recommending. This is the message we should be communicating. These are the documents. We need a traffic study. We need this and that and the other, which are not strictly legal, but they do come out of the legal requirements. For example, the requirements will say these are the things you need to prove. You need to prove that it's not a detriment to the neighbor. So we might interpret that as a lawyer to say, well, in order to prove that it's not a detriment to the neighbor, we think we need a traffic study, and we think we need this and this and this. So even though it sounds like we're just communicating a bunch of things, it's all sort of coming from our understanding of the law and what the requirements are for what we have to prove. So I kind of neglected to explain that at the beginning of why are we doing all this outreach? Because we want to make these findings. We want to be able to make these proofs. And not only from what's in the code, but there's case law too that you have to look at to see how the courts have interpreted meaning these findings and things like that, and legal notices and whether it's adequate notice. And so there's quite a bit of looking at case law that we also really didn't dwell on, maybe because it's not as fun as, but
we don't do quite as much of that. But there are, like, I would say the way we divide that up is there's a lot of heavy legal stuff in the beginning, on the front end of a new project, like Donna said, kind of doing your due diligence and vetting out everything. And then when you move into the more negotiation process, there's a lot of persuasion there too. You know, matters that come to us are not always the most straightforward. So you're sometimes finding yourself fitting a square peg in a round hole, or vice versa, because just like I mentioned with that, the plasma client that we have, you know, we'll have to make an argument that, and we'll have to draw from other resources and cite precedent that, well, a medical office does include this, and here's why A, B, C, D. You know, you can cite to this higher authority. You know, there's a whole table of industrial classifications, things like that. So there's quite a bit of that. But I think you're right. You're catching on that. A big part of what we do, and a lot of, especially younger attorneys do, is project management. And that's definitely a skill to be very aware of that I don't know that's always explained in law school, that's a lot of what you're going to be doing your first few years out of law school, but you will be doing a lot of that. And it's good to be aware of that now. You're definitely going to be researching case law and reviewing documents and writing things, but there's a lot of just kind of herding cats that all lawyers really do. And
yeah, in fact, I was going to say that's probably typical of a lot of different legal areas, like transactional. Of course, it sounds like it's all about reading documents and drafting documents, but a lot of it is the checklist. Every day they go through, do they have the survey? Does the survey need to be revised? Do we change the title? Do we get that back? You know, and there's a lot of project management in all legal actions. And the sooner someone gets good at that, the more desirable you'll be as either in a law firm. Those are the people you want to go to, the person that's organized, and the person that says to you, when do you need this by? You love that person because they're organized. They want a deadline. Those kind of people rise above the others. And even in a firm, let's say like KPMG or something like that, we do some work with people at Heitman, and they're always talking about kind of how they see some of the younger folks coming along, and the ones that are good at project management, whether we're talking in a legal environment or not, those are the people that seem to be in demand. So that's a great question. But Jack, I know we're out of time.
Yeah, I'll just check any other questions. Obviously want to be respectful to Mike and Donna's time. If there aren't any others, I guess would it be all right if people reach out to you guys with questions if they have anything lingering?
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
we can put our emails back on the screen.
Yeah, actually, you know, it could work if you could send me a copy of the PowerPoint. I could just circulate that to the club if that works for you guys.
That'd be
Great.
great.
So I'll go ahead and do that. But thank you guys. This was really great. Definitely the most in-depth perspective on zoning that we've had thus far. So far we've had mostly the transactional side. So this is a nice different perspective. So we very much appreciate you sharing your time with us, and we'll hope to have you back again next year, or heck, maybe even next semester for a whole different side of things.
Yeah.
Whatever you
Absolutely.
need.
Yep.
Okay.
Great to be here.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Bye.
All right. Bye,
Okay.
everyone.